So very excited to be here with you all today. And Robin, thank you for organising. What an exciting day. And, you know, what collaboration and sharing of ideas. I'm very much happy to be part of this conversation. And today's topic, supercharging your learning transfer with AI. My name is Emma Weber from Lever Transfer of Learning. We can be found at transferoflearning.com. So today I'm going to kick off with what is learning transfer, just to ensure that we're all on the sort of the same page with what is transfer, and then get into the exciting part of what is artificial intelligence, and more specifically chatbots. Then I'm going to chat through how the two, learning transfer and chatbots, can work together, and talk you through our tool Coach M, and share with you a case study that we did with a client. And of course, some lessons learnt. Wouldn't be a learning company if we weren't learning lessons along the way, and also next steps of how you can engage with us. So I hope that sounds of interest to people and what you're expecting from today's session. So let's kick us off with what is learning transfer, and feel free, guys, if you want to put your own definitions of learning transfer in the chat box, you are very welcome. My team and I have got a big mission of making a difference to the standard of learning transfer globally, so that learning can be a really key contributor to sustainable business growth. Well, and what do we mean by that? Well, I think we'll be no stranger to the old wasted training dollars, and to what level, when people have been on a learning intervention, do they actually apply what they've learned? And this is the problem that we're trying to solve, and the gap that we fill in this space. And when I think of learning, I think of just two distinct parts. I think of the skills and knowledge part of learning, and the behavioural change. And until we have the two working together, we don't really have a full picture of learning. A lot of the time, I think as an industry, we've got very good at delivering the skills and knowledge so that people know information and know how to do a certain soft skill or item, but do they actually do it in the moment when the pressure is on? So this learning model, I think of it as the difference between what do we know and what do we actually do. And of course, the doing is the behavioural change. And this is our behavioural change dog, who clearly needs a few lessons in what to do differently. And so when we're talking about learning transfer and the behavioural change, I often talk about the analogy of a smartphone. And it's a little bit like creating a learning intervention or a training program, and that being the smartphone itself. We really need to be adding a charger with that, so that the brilliance of your program or your learning intervention isn't short-lived. And so just have that metaphor in mind as we're talking about transfer today. Have we got any opinions of what learning transfer is in the chat box? Please feel free to share if anyone wants to share what their thoughts are around learning transfer. All good if you just want to listen in also. Any thoughts? Perhaps what it specifically means to you. Nice one, Glynis. Application of new knowledge to existing work practices. And I think this is where we have the knowledge versus an actual behaviour. But of course, if it's an application of knowledge, then that could be a behavioural piece. Craig, nice to see you on here today. Part of the workflow, yes, it's when learning actually becomes part of what people do in the everyday. Absolutely applying what you've learned. And Robin, I think performance change and performance outcomes is something that we're all talking about and wanting to achieve for our organisations. So our specific learning transfer model is 3 very simple steps. It's the preparation of setting someone up for success, action conversations that happen over a period of time, and then evaluation piece to see whether that behaviour is actually changed. And of course, all of this happens over a period of time. So it's not an in the moment, it's over a number of weeks when someone's actually applying what they have learned from a learning intervention. And I share this model just to give you a few ideas and some context. You may have your own learning transfer models that you use within your organisations. I'm sure perhaps they have similar aspects to this. I think one of the other interesting things to say about learning transfer before we move on to the exciting world of AI is that as an organization, we've had over 18,000 one-on-one learning transfer conversations. So we've collected a lot of data and a lot of information and a lot of pattern spotting from those conversations that we've had. We collected impact dashboards for every cohort that's been through. I've written a couple of books about learning transfer, and we're also helping create internal learning transfer teams, which I think is an area which will become even more important. So with all this information and experience, obviously, as technology changes in the world that we're at today, I was being encouraged to really think, well, how does technology start to impact our business? And I went on a sort of a 2-year exploration into looking at all different sorts of learning transfer technologies. And as I started to explore different learning transfer technologies, I couldn't really find the technology that really fitted with my philosophy around learning transfer. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in a moment, because that speaks to why we've chosen to go down the chatbot path as we have. So let's start talking about the technology. What is artificial intelligence? Who would like to share their ideas or thoughts of artificial intelligence? Now, one of the definitions that I've been using is the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence. Does that send us into fear? Does it send us into excitement? I think, and as Robin said, we're going to have some more, exactly, the Terminator, some more information coming up about AI and broader application of it. Tina, great that you're excited about this whole idea of artificial intelligence. I think in the very beginning, I was particularly, how would we say it? Maybe a little bit skeptical, and really thinking, well, actually, how is this physically going to work? How could we use artificial intelligence to help us with what we're doing? And this is when I started to explore chatbots. Who has used a chatbot? Let's actually get some information coming in here. And definition of a chatbot here, yes, Ruth, maybe what context have you used a chatbot? And Christine, love to hear from you. Maybe which context you've used chatbot in. And we're using the definition of it's a computer program designed to simulate conversation with human users, especially over the internet. Travel agents and bank support. Yeah, quite often. And so Christine, would that be in a customer support? So quite often a chatbot is used in a customer support function. Microsoft Teams already have chatbots inbuilt, yes. Website instant chats. Christine using it for support, quick questions, etc. And I think that's the common way that we're starting to see chatbots becoming pervasive. And sometimes you don't even, when you're talking to a customer service chatbot, you don't even know whether you're talking to the bot or the human. Tina, exactly. You and I are on the same page here. It can be difficult to tell. Now, what's interesting is if you actually think, how does it work? Well, a chatbot works in a similar manner to a human at a help desk. I think that could be broadly said to be true. However, if we think about a learning transfer chatbot, does that work in a similar manner to a human at a help desk? Let's have a few answers from the audience here. Are we going for a true or are we going for a false? That a learning transfer chatbot works in a similar manner to a human at a help desk? Or I should say specifically the learning transfer chatbot that we've developed. Sumi, thank you for playing the game. We've got a yes there, a yes from Christine. Anyone else want to give in a vote? Ruth and I think so. Ooh, Murray, false linear development. You might want to put more information in there. David, you're thinking no. Tina's a maybe. Glynis a maybe. in most cases, Craig, you think it would need to know you a bit. So it's all fascinating conversations and fascinating different aspects. What I'm going to share with you is where I came to with it when I was looking at something that really aligned with my options for learning transfer. And Murray, I think we'll get on to the options limited piece slightly later. If we don't, please feel free to bring it back up in the chat box, Murray. The chatbot has a greater range of resources. Well, I've got to say, when I was looking at how to create a chatbot, a learning transfer chatbot, I decided not to go with the common way of using chatbots. So I think a lot of the time, you know, we learn from other industries that are using different technologies in other ways to say, well, actually, how can we apply that technology in our own industry? Now, what's interesting is if I think about what we know about learning transfer, and guys, I really do want to make today about the chatbot and about not necessarily about learning transfer, but unless we stay true to a philosophy of learning transfer, the technology just then becomes a technology for its technology's sake. So with our approach to learning transfer, I really believe you can't nag or remind someone into behavioral change. You really need to help someone reflect and hold themselves accountable to themselves. So in terms of sending out additional content, sending out reminders, sending out more references about content that you've already covered in a course, that's not the way that we approach learning transfer. We don't nag and we don't remind, we make it self-accountability driven. The second piece is making it learner-led. So I think a lot of the time with learning transfer, we really want to push it back to the learner so that the learner takes control of the transfer, which of course is very important. But we've got a picture of the Slinky here. Does anyone remember the old toy, the Slinky, that we can, run up and down the stairs? So the Slinky for us is around this balance between structure and flexibility. Because if we just pass the learning transfer over to the learner without giving them some sort of structure to work with, there's almost too much for them to manage. So in our view of learning transfer, we need to have enough structure that it helps people learn and it kind of gives them a bit of a framework to hang a hat on, but also enough flexibility that they can take ownership for doing it their own way and in their own context. Okay. The next piece, which is important for us around learning transfer, we've already touched on, that it's about the behavioral change and not about sending out additional information, which essentially, if you think of a customer service chatbot, most of the time they're actually helping you solve your problems by answering your questions or giving you additional information. Now, most of the time when it comes down to behavioral change post-learning, it's not because people don't know how to put something into place that they are stuck. It's much more likely to be around prioritizing or some kind of, fear is perhaps too strong a word, but some kind of reluctance. Could be something around their peers and the context, could be around confidence. So none of those are actually about needing additional information, which a traditional chatbot would give you. Okay. Our final picture here, the blocked sink versus the toddler. So let me explain that picture. A blocked sink learning to us is when you've got an immediate issue in the moment and you need to solve that. So for example, you've got a blocked sink, you need to find out how to unblock your sink. Or you're going into a performance conversation, you need to find out in that moment how you're going to have that conversation. Versus a lot of the learning we're trying to do with our clients is around the development. So it's that continuous learning, it's that continuous growth. It's not pinpointing a problem and needing how to know it in that moment. So if, for example, you are working with the type of learning that you need to know in that moment, that may be where you kind of go for the customer service chatbot type approach, solving how do I unblock a sink. But for other types of learning and development, I think there's a better way to do it. So let's continue on the discussion. Things are very quiet in the chat box. Either people are completely blown away and into the conversation, or something else is happening. So feel free to either agree or disagree as we chat here about transfer. So I'm going to, this is the final piece where we're talking about transfer here. So I think the old paradigm of transfer is where we try and control people to change their behaviors and make them compliant to putting their learning into place and focusing on additional content. The new paradigm of transfer, which we have had as the basis of our chatbot, is around getting people to be curious and creative about how they apply the learning and specifically thinking about their own context. And this is where they can get the behavioral change through reflection and self-accountability. So where does the chatbot come in? I know we're dying to hear. So essentially our learning transfer chatbot is a self-coaching tool, helps guide reflection on specific commitments that people set at the end of a learning intervention, uses artificial intelligence chatbot technology. It's delivered through SMS or a messenger platform. And that's quite exciting because when we're getting people to change their behaviors, I often say what you're trying to do is to get the individual to have a conversation with themselves. And so when you're doing that, you need to be getting them to have the conversation where they'd have the conversation with their nearest and dearest, which is why SMS or messenger platforms are so much more powerful than email. Interesting point there, Glynis. Need to promote critical thinking. Yes, I think that's important. And I think that will actually play into the piece around behavioral change as people really start to reflect. One of the things that I get quite distressed about is that people are forgetting how to reflect and how to slow down and how to really think about things. And so one of the things that we've found when we start working with people on learning transfer is it's actually teaching them the skill of reflection. So continuing on with Coach N, it's tailored to the individual because it's working on the individual actions that are and commitments that an individual has specified at the end of the learning. And we've included animated videos to help deepen the reflection. So I don't know whether you can tell from this webinar recording, but I'm the type of person that why would you use 6 words when you can use 24 and get really animated about it? Now that's tricky when you're trying to do everything by SMS message. And I've certainly had to, clarify my thought patterns, clarify my questioning. But we have found animated videos is a great way to then expand and get that, the feeling and the emotion around a reflection that someone's having. So let's keep moving here. So we all know that when we have a learning intervention and we follow up with a coaching component, it has much better results than a training alone. And often we are looking for the managers to have those learning transfer conversations, or you may have the internal team, or you may work with external. But depending on the initiative, budget may not always be available for that, or it may not be time that is available for that. So I think this is where things like chatbots really start to come into their own because it is such a scalable solution. And I'm just checking out here, Glynis, your comment in the... Yes, so, and Glynis, are you talking there that people want a single answer to transfer? It's an interesting question, Tina, about the technological capability. What I think is fascinating is because this actually comes through SMS, like literally a text message, it doesn't necessarily feel a particularly high-tech solution, which may seem a sort of a counterintuitive thing when we're talking about artificial intelligence here. But I think people are so used to sending text messages that it becomes a very easy way for people to start to relate. Well, do people mistrust who's speaking with them? I think the key thing is you've got to communicate that people are speaking with a bot. David, you're concurring with me there that this is not high tech. Thank you. Good to see we're on the same page. I think you've got to communicate that people are speaking with a bot. But what I found fascinating, and we'll kind of keep moving through the results of the case study, is that people really opened up to the bot and started to form a relationship with it. In terms of privacy, I think one of the things that you need to do is, you need to make sure everything is GDPR compliant wherever we are in the world. And that's certainly something that we've worked with our partners on and for ourselves. So I think you need to be able to show the technical people that you have ticked all those boxes and that, of course, privacy is important. So if we think back to the 3-stage process for learning transfer, we talked about preparation, where you capture the commitments, the action conversations, which these will be being had with a bot, and the evaluation. Now, in terms of capturing the actions, this is a free tool. I'll give you the details again for later on, but this is turninglearningintoaction.com, which is basically a free action planning tool where people can PDF action plans to 2 nominated email addresses and to themselves at the end of a learning intervention. We've developed this as part of our mission to make a difference to learning transfer worldwide. But when we're working with the bot, these actions are API'd directly to the bot. And of course, we've got a picture of a bot here just because this is visual that looks like a human. But in reality, this comes through as a text message. So we know that, oh, sorry, Craig, beg your pardon, API. Oh, do I know what that definition actually means? I don't know that unless someone may know the exact definition. It just means it's a computer connection that takes data from one application into another. Thank you, Robin, application programming interface. So it's just a way of transferring information. So the information comes from the action planning tool into the bot. We know that increasingly organizations are going to be looking to use bots in different ways. And with this one, we take the behavioral change commitments, which we've just talked about there at turninglearningintoaction.com. We API it into CoachM, and then people are encouraged to take regular learning breaks over a 6 to 8 week period. So let me tell you what a learning break looks like to me. Excuse me while I just have some water. It's because I get overexcited and don't take enough air in when I talk transfer. And then end up almost choking, so apologies. Craig, you've heard me talk transfer before. Is this true or what? So a learning break, essentially, my vision is the learning break is when someone takes a cup of coffee or their favorite beverage, they take their mobile phone and they sit down and they have a conversation with the bot about the learning that they've said they're going to put into place. It's very similar to the way that 6,000 people have had one-on-one conversations with my team, with a phone, chatting about their action plan. But this is completely learner driven. So the reminding and the prompting is reminding people to actually sit down and take that learning break. And that's part of our Slinky, structure. But the actual learning break itself is really driven by the individual and the actions that they've chosen. There is also an option that an individual can then reach out and have support from a live specialist. So you can have a kind of a hybrid approach. And then, of course, the results are shared with the organization by an impact dashboard. So that's just a real basis of how we worked with this product as we went into the case study for our client. So let me tell you a little bit about the client. It was a pharmaceutical company needing to support learning transfer for very busy sales managers, often out in the field, had the problem of finding time to focus and reflect. I'm sure we can all relate to that. And they'd attended they had a conference and they had one-day learning as part of a conference kickoff. And the facilitator running that learning intervention really wanted to support people to apply the learning. And this is where they approached us and we developed this coaching bot. So let me tell you what we thought might happen. And I did speak to being a little bit skeptical at the early stages here. So we're encouraging people to have 3 learning breaks, and that's what that S1 to 3 refers to. And we thought we'd probably get 80, 40, and maybe by the third learning break that we may just have 20% of people still engaged. And I said to our client, I said, would you still be happy with that? Are you happy if we go ahead with that kind of premise? We thought we'd have people taking a learning break for about 5 to 10 minutes. We thought they might get a little bit bored perhaps with the learning break, or they may try and just tick the box and just give one-word answers to the questions that we were asking them. So we kind of put that on the table as a worst-case scenario. But let me share what actually happened. Again, if anyone wants to share any thoughts in the chat box, please do as we go through. So our engagement rates were way higher than we had anticipated. Had 100% of people having a first learning break, 87% second, and 67% third. And what we found is people were having 20 to 30 minutes at a time sat down talking to their learning bot. Way more than we had anticipated. And we had a real depth of conversation that people were having. And interestingly, the only person that was having quite short sentences, English was their second language. So it was no wonder. I want to share some actual parts of the conversation with you. You can see here how the videos were embedded in the text message. And this is a particular participant who was working on a goal around applying the ladder of inference model to coaching and sales interactions. And so one of the things that amazed me, and you can see in the green here is the participant. And they're sharing things like, so how might you move this scale up, this item up the scale? I'd consciously considering where someone is on the ladder prior to our interactions. They then went on to say, I'll do individual assessments on each of my team and their positions around particular topics. They then added they wanted to do some reading on the practical use of the ladder. We then explored some of the barriers, how they would overcome it, and when they would schedule their follow-up. So good question, Lindsay. This sample size was just 16 people. So it was very much a small experiment that we wanted to dip our toe into the water with, partly because we were trying to test out our assumptions. But what you can see here is really deep conversations that people were having. We also had the feedback at the end of the pilot/experiment that people felt it helped them get greater alignment, increase their focus, and they had a 35% uplift in the ability to achieve their objectives. So Tina, did I write the questions? Yes. So what we've taken is we've taken our methodology, which, as I said, 18,000 one-on-one telephone conversations around learning transfer. We took that experience and have programmed that into the AI. For a 3-question combination, just 3 questions within this is 127 different paths that someone can go down. It's really fascinating when you really think about programming artificial intelligence in this way. This particular artificial intelligence, we haven't used machine learning. I think it will come in the future. But what's actually interesting is when you look at the success rates, machine learning actually throws up a lot more errors. And because this is a really high touch process, we need to make sure that it's very, very robust. The minute someone has a bad conversation with an AI, you'll know that that is really going to throw people. So there's a couple of comments here. What I've learned was that make sure it's not about the technology, but it's about what you're trying to achieve. And I think augmenting your technologies are really important. So we've planned in working with, an individual person for a real conversation if people need help, adding in the action planning and the videos to really expand what you do with your technology. And then the final thing I learned was to be really prepared to be amazed at what you can achieve using AI. So in terms of, thanks Craig, yes, branching on ACID. What's next for CoachM? We're looking at a paper being written by Dr. Jason Huang from Michigan State. If anyone would like to get involved in that, we're looking for a pilot group of 300 people that we can do different scenarios with. So I'm really excited that that's something we're going to be looking at. And of course, if anyone would like to do a demo, you're more than welcome. Please feel free, though, to use the freebie of the turninglearningintoaction.com action plan online. And if you, as I say, if you'd like to schedule a time to chat and have a demo, I'm really excited. I can talk about learning transfer for hours, and Robin, I frequently do, so I hope I'm just within time. If it's hard to actually get down this link here, if you can see here, more at leverlearning.com. So that's MOR at leverlearning.com. That will actually send you the link to get involved with a demo, and also you'll get some other free resources there. Robin, thank you again for inviting me to be part of this. I hope I've encouraged people to explore more about AI and chatbots and how that can help them, and I'm very happy to extend the conversation another time. Thank you, Robin.